Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. It's Friday. We did it again. We made it through another week, and today will be day 70 something or other of the United States of America versus Joe Biggs. Day 3 of jury deliberations. Will today be the day? Will we get a verdict? Hard to tell. The jury's only going to be in from 1:30 to 5 today. One of the jurors had some sort of reason to be out of the building, and so we'll have only a half a day. They had a full day yesterday, and when they came in to report their labors for the day had concluded, it was a working group. They looked exhausted, and they looked very much as though they were fully engaged in the business of sorting through the case of United States of America effectively versus the Proud Boys. Pay special attention when this verdict comes in to counts 3 and 5. These are counts that charge both a conspiracy and then a substantive offense to, quote, corruptly interfere or impede an official proceeding. There's a lot of discussion in the courts in D.C. right now about what it means to corruptly do anything. But under 18 United States Code, Section 1512C2, what, me, a law nerd? Under 18 United States Code, Section 1512C2, it is a felony carrying up to 20 years to corruptly try to impede an official proceeding. And the government took the position in the Proud Boys prosecution that that meant doing something for an unlawful purpose to benefit yourself or a third party, including, in this case, Donald Trump. And thus, an unlawful purpose being corrupt attempts to interfere with the electoral count that day, January 6th, meet the definition of the statute. We said it didn't. The court ruled against us, and that will be an issue on appeal. But one of the things several of us argued to the jury was, wait a minute. Can it really be corrupt to listen to the president? Who are you going to believe? Who are you going to believe, the commander in chief or the thief? If the president is telling you the election is stolen and he tells you to go up to the Capitol and fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore, that imposes something like a good faith cloak on the activity of the rioters. The jury will have to decide. But the fact that the Justice Department construes this statute so broadly, and the fact that Mike Pence spent 5 hours, one floor below us, in the grand jury before special counsel Jack Smith's grand jury testifying, suggests to me that the government is seriously contemplating a prosecution of Donald Trump for acting under 1815-12.
Well, let's tease that a little bit, Norm. Let's soften everybody up with some humor before we get into the.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. All business jumping in, right?
So what we have to talk about first and foremost is my Carolina Panthers with the overall #1 pick, selecting none other than Bryce Young, the highest scoring rookie on the S2 cognitive test at a 98, and the two overall pick to the Texans got like an 18.
What is the S2 cognitive test?
No one really knows what it means, Norm, but it's provocative. It's a cognitive test. How smart is your quarterback coming?
Well, how smart or how brain damaged? Are they? They're investing millions in these young men who've already taken a world-class pounding in college football. But I want to know, what is the S2 cognitive test? Do we have any idea what it actually tests? Is it football acumen? Is it a general intelligence test? Is it the SAT for superheroes?
Yes,
what is it?
So I think that if I had to make a really crude comparison, it would be something like the LSAT or something like the SAT or something like the GRE for NFL combine purposes and for NFL scouts. I think I was telling you, NFL football is a big business. And in particular, when you're talking about a team's future and parity of the league, vetting prospects that at this level are, elite of elite in their field. But there is a question of whether the talent that you observe on the college football field will translate to the NFL field. And if you're going to, in the case of a quarterback in particular, if you're going to invest the structured money on a rookie deal for a quarterback and tie up your franchise for at least 4 years with an option to exercise the 5th year, teams are always looking for competitive ways to gain an advantage. And if there is a way for them to determine whether a prospect is able to think quickly to think in certain directions, to understand fact patterns, and a way for them to assess whether there is an aspect of their physical ability that can be made better by their decision making, they're going to try it. So the S2 test is somewhat new. They've been doing it for several years now.
Did they start doing it after the Tim Tebow disaster? See, that's what I want to know. Hey, wow, this car, this thing is really shiny. It really looks good, but wait a minute, it doesn't go anywhere.
You know what the S2 can't test for?
No,
bad fashion.
Wait a minute. What is that? What is that?
Look, it's Bryce Young at the draft with some spare sleeves. Don't you like the spare sleeves?
Well, yeah, the sleeves, but what's that thing over? What's that thing over his intimate parts?
Yeah, look, it's like spare sleeves. It looks like a kilt. It looks like a double-breasted kilt, salmon-colored double-breasted kilt to the NFL draft. You're the #1 overall pick, 2023.
And you can't afford a tie?
This is my reservation, the level of seriousness or lack thereof. I mean, there's no maturity here. And, okay, he scored a 98 on the S2, but what does that mean if I have to watch this?
Here's what I want to know. What does Bryce Young identify as? Because he's not acting like he's identifying as the #1 draft prospect and a guy who's ready to enter into a serious career as a professional athlete. However, I guess real men can wear kilts. And what do we have any idea what he's being paid for his efforts?
It's all pre-structured. So the Panthers, with the first overall pick, spending it on a quarterback, it'll be pretty expensive. They'll have the option to pick him up for the 5th year if they want to. But he's a young guy. I don't know what I don't know off the top of my head what the league has negotiated with the Players Association with respect to these deals, but that's been a point of contention over the last several years. Position by position is the NFL Players Association negotiating with the NFL to try and get as much guaranteed money for these guys that are flinging their bodies around as much as they can. So we'll see.
So Rachel Perry Goff is, she's offering the assessment that this wardrobe choice is a balance of masculinity and femininity. Maybe, Rachel, but the minute he gets behind the quarter or the center, starts calling plays in high heels, I'm losing interest in the game. He's back to pass. Whoops, the heel, bro.
BTL wins the day. She says he identifies as QB1. Well done. I love that.
It works for me. Well, good luck to him. All right, now you're a Carolina fan, so is this
a
good thing or a bad thing for your team?
No, I mean we've totally rebuilt. So I think I sent you an article a few weeks ago, Norm, but the late Jerry Richardson, he was the founder of the Carolina Panthers. He was a former NFL player before the NFL was the NFL. I think he was, basically boys with some of the legendary quarterbacks. Founder of Hardee's, if you can believe that, is Jerry Richardson, founder of the Panthers. And he brought it to North Carolina. He was embattled in the latter parts of his life with some allegations of sexually inappropriate dealings with staff, whatever.
He wore a kilt and high heels into the training room and demanded a massage?
He absolutely bowed out. And he did not fight any of the allegations. I think it was a matter of trying to ensure that what he had built did not get dragged through the mud based on his personal conduct, and he sold it. So David Tepper, venture capitalist, billionaire, has come in and taken the team over. He's made some questionable leadership decisions thus far, but last year the Panthers did some major structural changes to the franchise in terms of players and deals and all that kind of stuff. And we actually spent a lot of capital to move up to the first overall pick. We traded the Bears for their #1 overall pick. So we'll see. I think this is a good thing. Post Cam Newton, we need better leadership. And certainly if Bryce Young scored a 98 on the S2, I have to imagine that Cam Newton couldn't even write his name.
I don't know. Look, I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the outfit and I'm thinking, the Pantherettes, I mean, I'm just not, I wish him well. I wish you well. I'm waiting for football, but what's this going on in the Jets? In the Jets, are they, the Kiev Jets tired of New York? We're not getting enough people rooting for us in New York. We're tired of competing with the Giants. Yeah. So we're moving our stadium to Kiev, a Ukrainian flag. What up with that?
You have to think, you have to imagine me for a second sitting mere feet away from my 72-year-old father, veteran. His father was bombardier in World War II, Purple Heart earner, right? These, former SWAT team, law enforcement, that kind of stuff. And then he already has a hard time putting eyeballs on the NFL product these days anyway. But please imagine the tense nature of my household when this popped up on the screen last night. And the New York Jets the war room has a Ukraine flag.
No, I mean, look, hey, the Kiev Jets has a certain cachet to it, I mean, I have not yet seen a reason to invest in the Ukraine war that persuades me it's in the national interest. Putting an NFL franchise in Kiev might do it for me. So this could be a shrewd foreign policy move conducted by President Biden in conjunction with the NFL, but something tells me it's not.
Absolutely not. Super hollow, but it is what it is.
How much of a Michigan flunky am I? When I woke up this morning and I wanted to check the first round, I wanted to see, did a Michigan player make the first round? And Mazzy did. Defensive tackle, I think he went in round 26, a little low in the pecking order, but at least we made it.
Not really, Norm. I mean, these guys, if you're in the first round, that's a major deal. And yeah, your guy Mazzy went. There were a ton of offensive and defensive linemen in this.
That's really interesting to me. That's really interesting to me.
Which I love to see, because typically those are going to be, those are the hardest working guys on the field, in my opinion. Yeah. Maybe not the ones that get the notoriety, but I have a tremendous amount of respect. And typically they are the guys that are also looking at they have longer careers, and if they don't have a longer career, they have a productive post-NFL life. So good for those guys. I think there are like 5 offensive tackles taken within the first 25 picks or something crazy.
Well, that is an important position. It protects the quarterback's back. Looking forward to football season beginning again. I can't help it. I'm just that kind of guy.
But my fantasy football team name is the Crystal Methodist. What do you think about that?
I think you're kidding. I hope. Are you kidding?
No, that's my fantasy football name.
That's your fantasy football.
Yeah.
I want to know what the real fantasy football name is. I haven't played fantasy football in a number of years, and the problem is I can never get myself organized enough to pay attention to things early in the season to make meaningful choices. Maybe this year will be the year that I change. Now that Alex Jones and the Proud Boys are behind me, and it's funny, I was in the hallway shooting the breeze in court yesterday with some of the activists who followed the case, and one of them said, "Oh, all my friends who are Trump supporters are really angry with you." And I said, "Well, why is that?" "Well, in your closing argument, you blame Trump." And I said, "Well, don't you think he's responsible?" "Well, I guess you won't be on Team Trump if he gets indicted." And that's probably a fair inference. Although if we win the Proud Boys case, it wouldn't surprise me to see somebody in the rank of that wave of prosecutions reach in to the Proud Boy defenders for advice and perhaps assistance, because I do believe that the Justice Department can make a case and it can establish to a grand jury's satisfaction, especially a grand jury of DC grand jurors, that Trump behaved corruptly in the run-up to the January 6th election. And I wouldn't be surprised to see, as I said earlier, a conspiracy charge against him, and maybe even a substantive charge as well. And the cast of witnesses would be impressive. There would be Mike Pence, and would Donald testify? He's avoided thus far the Jean Carroll rape trial in Manhattan. He's being defended there by Joe Tacopino of New York City. And Tacopino went after Carroll yesterday, as always in a rape case. It was contentious and bitter. But Donald has no duty to testify in that case. He's been deposed. He doesn't have to appear. He would be required to attend his criminal case. Now, he could waive attending, and the court would have to determine that it was a knowing and intelligent waiver. So, and by questioning Trump. So the highest drama in a federal prosecution of Trump would be Trump being made accountable to a federal judge. Because even if he was going to say, "I'm running for president, I'm too busy to attend my own trial," he'd have to persuade the judge that he was knowingly and intelligently waiving that right. And he'd have to speak to the judge and be spoken to as one is spoken to by a federal judge. That is, the mountain would be looking down on Mohammed and saying, "You'll speak when spoken to, sir." So, I suspect within the next 5 or 6 weeks, Jack Smith will go to the Justice Department, and the graybeards in that department will make the following decision: to indict or not to indict. Given Biden's reliance on J6 rhetoric, imagery, and whatnot, I suspect there will be an indictment. And candidly, I think it would be good for the country, because I think that the stop the steal rhetoric isn't, in my opinion, Mike, I know you and I may disagree, but I don't believe that there is compelling evidence, any evidence actually, that there was systemic fraud of such a nature as to materially affect the outcome of the case. I think there were irregularities. I think there are questions. I think we need to tidy up the electoral process. But no one around Trump internally was telling him there was reason to believe this occurred. So I think that Smith and Company could raise a wire fraud claim against him. They could raise a claim of corrupt purpose conspiracy and corrupt purpose substantive count. And the president could say, but I was president at the time. You have to substitute the United States as a party. That wouldn't work any more than his attempt to dodge Ms. Carroll's earlier defamation suit by claiming that he made these comments as part of his duties as president. When a president acts and hurts another person, and that person brings an action, if that action survives, it becomes an action against the United States rather than the president, unless, of course, the president was behaving in an unlawful or corrupt manner. So buckle your seatbelts, off we go. That will be a truly interesting and historic case. And I think the Proud Boys case is a warm up for it. All 20,000 pages of the transcript will be a roadmap for the lawyers and prosecutors to study.
That was what I was just thinking. You have to assume that the prosecutors involved in this are getting reps in where defense attorneys, who would purportedly represent Trump would be sort of awash in new material. And so they're getting a feel for the landscape. They're getting a feel for all the information that is available. They're, sort of culling through that, triaging things, giving it different density and weight, and developing strategy that can be deployed more broadly. So obviously there are facts that are unique to Trump, but I think that is probably the best persuasive argument, in my opinion, that it will be another 5 to 6 weeks. I think we will see a resolution. We will get a verdict here in the January 6th trials for the Proud Boys, and there will be a slight lull, and then an announcement of indictment will be made. So look, we're looking at what, early June? Is that your prediction?
It's something like that. Yeah, because I think it's running. It's running up to the presidential campaign, and the Justice Department has a policy of not charging or engaging in charging decisions that could materially affect a presidential election. And, as with every rule, there's an outer limit to when the rule is applicable. And I think Trump and the Biden administration's determination to prosecute every single blade of grass on the lawn that was present unlawfully in the vicinity of the Capitol on January 6th, to go relentlessly after each person, suggests they can't stop now. And rather than offering an olive branch to those who acted that day, as we did in the Civil War, within 2 years of the Civil War, the Confederates had been restored to the full rights of citizenship. 2 years plus, we're still going after people who engaged in one riot. And we are still identifying defendants and hailing them into court. So if the commander in chief was the guy who was inspiring them on, it seems to me inevitable that he will be prosecuted, and the Justice Department will say, yeah, we have a general rule against not prosecuting if it'll affect an election. But in this case, as President Biden announced in his campaign, when he opened the campaign, we're fighting to save democracy, and the image he used was January 6th. And if Donald Trump was the chief cheerleader, it seems to me that he's going to be dragged onto the playing field. So June's as good a bet as any.
We've got a few.
I would bet on it, but I wouldn't bet with a credit card. I'd bet with cash. But anyway, we'll pivot to that in a moment.
Here, look, Pete Atkinson is a late arrival.
Hey, Pete.
Pete, you're only 20 minutes late. It's all right, though. Good morning.
Well, he probably was drinking good wine. When his brother Will and I went out to dinner the other day, Pete did the wine selection. It was really good. I'm not much of a wine drinker, but boy, he's got good taste.
So we've got all the usual suspects here today. Lawyer Well, BTL, Freedom Lover.
Lawyer Well.
In the chat. We've also got It's Me Again, Cy. That name is growing on me a lot. And let's see. It's Me Again, Cy says, not sure how they're, surprised the jury is out so long. I don't think this doesn't really seem very long to me, Norm, just based on the length of the trial and the sheer volume of information and exhibits that they'll have, at their disposal. And also, I'm just sort of grateful that they've been out for a couple of days at least, regardless of the outcome.
Me
because,
too. Worst,
you know what I mean?
worst fear for a defense lawyer. You fight your heart out for weeks, in this case, months. Jury gets the case before they even order lunch. We've got a verdict, guilty. I mean, that there are a few forms of humiliation as deep as that for a trial lawyer.
Let's see. Thinking Man says, does Norm think Trump will be the Republican nominee for 24? And if so, will he win?
I do think he'll be the Republican nominee for 24. There was a poll. I don't recall who did it. It might have been Rasmussen. I saw it in the middle of the night when I woke up sleeplessly wondering about the verdict. And it had Trump with, I don't know, 52, I think, or 62% of early support. And everyone else was down in the single digit category. Even Vivek, as I'm now told, I must say it. Even he had, I think, only 3%. And so, there's some discussion about how robust the primary season will be this year. We've got, the DNC saying there won't be debates. We've got Donald way out ahead. And it's starting to look like a replay of 2020. And so my prediction is that it's going to be Trump versus Biden, even if Trump gets indicted. And that will energize Trump's base, but I'm not sure what it'll do to the center. And so, to the degree that demographics are changing and Gen Z is promising to get out the vote and flexing its muscles, you see this in the marching around the Tennessee and the Tennessee Capitol, and you see a lot of chest thumping online. We're here and we're ready. I think that in the end, that if it's Trump versus Biden again, it'll be an unenthusiastic win for Biden. And in my opinion, that would be the triumph of the managerial state, because I just don't see Biden as a person with the sort of character that I want leading the country. If I had to go into a polling place right now and I was told I had two options, vote or immediately go to hell and suffer eternally, I would hire Will Atkinson to argue for my my exemption from the vote. I would hire Pete Atkinson to advise Will on the theological arguments to respect my conscience. When the ruling came down, you must vote, and I got a whiff of the sulfuric fumes of hell, and I heard the screeching of the damned, and I went into the polling place, and I knew God was watching. If I had to pull the lever, which one would I pull? I would pull Trump. In spite of my great reservations about him, in fact, in spite of some personal revulsion over the manner in which he conducts himself and his grand narcissism, in the end, I resonate with a guy who says, excuse my language, F you to power. I resonate with a guy who says, look, I get it. You don't want the elites. You don't want these globalists. You don't want other people telling you what to do. I'm going to fight to make it possible for you to make decisions of significance for your own life. I like that more than I like Sleepy Joe saying we know what's best, and we're going to get, and I see this drift towards social utility scoring in things as small as the recent decision with respect to mortgage rates and mortgage insurance. If your credit score is higher, you're going to pay more to subsidize those who are lower. I mean, this kind of broad embrace of a diversity, DEI, whatever the E is, equity and inclusion agenda, social utility scoring, the drift toward reparations, the idea that identity matters. You look at that puppet that he's got as White House spokesman, and it's hard to believe she was picked for any other reason that she could speak in complete sentences and is a brown lesbian something or other, I'm just insulted by this notion that somehow politics has become a game of a race to the bottom. And unless we embrace the bottom, the top's going to get its head cut off. So I would vote for Trump and then probably end up in hell anyhow. But I don't think he's going to win because I don't think the numbers are there. I think that this next election would probably be Biden by about 4 percentage points, maybe even 5, which would be a big swing in the national election.
Yeah, well, look, Trump has his own problems politically.
You think? Yeah.
Well, I'm not referring to the legal stuff, but I'm talking about his base. If his base gets wise, as it appears it is at this point, to his involvement and his absolute refusal to give up the mantle of being, operate like taking Operation Warp Speed as a massive win and trying to take credit for that. There are huge issues that he has, and I think that what we're watching is basically going to be an election where Biden is running from his basement and Trump is running from the courtroom. And I don't know that we're going to get a whole lot of discourse and debate over the merits of the substantive issues that you were just bringing up, and that sort of the populist wave on the right is saying that they need debate about. We're watching Anheuser-Busch call emergency meetings because it appears as though their sales in all markets are failing behind the Dylan Mulvaney thing. And that's really important because it means that there are registered Democrats who are also not in favor of the policies that are being pushed by the Biden administration. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and it feels like at a certain point, a lot of people are going to start looking around who have been politically divided in a partisan manner and ask themselves, we seem to agree on way more than we don't.
I think that's right. And
why is it that we have these two extremely polarizing figures at the top who are not representing any of the interests that we care about?
And it seems to me that there should be a groundswell pushback at this point. We demand debates. We demand primaries. We want better choices, because the choices, the choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is unsavory in the extreme, as far as I'm concerned. And we just have to do better. I was so moved, again, I'll say it, even though we talked about it yesterday, by Tucker Carlson's appeal to reasonable people, saying basically that the media is controlling, big media, corporate media is setting the agenda, and it's agenda that doesn't really serve the needs and aspirations of ordinary people. And I think we need to be heard, whether you're a member of Generation X, Y, Z, a millennial, a boomer, whatever you are. You can't be looking at the political landscape with anything other than a sense of disgust, at least in my view. I sense no real enthusiasm or constructive enthusiasm, and we need to find it. And we need to find it in a hurry. Otherwise, we're going to have 4 more years of drift, and who knows where we will drift to.
That's right. Well, and this, I think this is a nice transition to the article that I have on the screen. This is something I'm oddly passionate about, is keeping fiat dollars in circulation. And I know that I'm probably an offender of the sensibilities of the principles that I'm advocating for now, just because of how often I use my debit card and how often I'm paying in a digital fashion. But North Carolina's legislature has proposed a bill that has passed a couple of committees. With the short title, it's called the Cash Commitment Act. Mm-hmm. And effectively, it is going to require retail businesses and healthcare institutions to accept cash payments in exchange for goods and services. They are not allowed to prohibit people from offering cash. Now, why is this relevant now? And why am
can I, before you get down to the relevance, can I ask a stupid question, Mike?
Sure.
I always thought the significance of dollars being legal tender is that merchants were required to take them.
No, the current state of federal law is such that merchants are not required to accept cash as payment. And I know that because I did the research on behalf of a client during COVID. So when on premise and in-person activity was curtailed in a heavy manner, people started getting nervous, and I had a client come to me and say, "Hey, I'm going to transition all of my operations to card only, digital transactions only. I don't want to hold cash, etc. What are my rights here?" And it was very clear. I mean, it's crystal clear. Merchants are not required to accept cash. I during the pandemic was, in grocery stores and these other, whatever chain.
You super spreader, you. Yeah. But anyhow.
And I kept seeing these signs about how there was a coin shortage, right? And, there's a coin shortage, please use Exact, or, please try to use credit, and da-da-da-da-da. My lizard brain kind of went off. I just didn't understand it, like how there was all of a sudden a coin shortage. Why was there a forced, I don't want to say forced, but why was there a sudden demand for coinage in the market, right? And why were these big chain grocery and retailers sort of trying to advocate for their customers to pay in small bills, pay exact change, or really to coerce them to pay in a digital fashion? But now we're starting to see with the social credit scoring and the social utility scoring, the ESG stuff. I'm really pleased to see this. And I know that my client would disagree because there are legitimate reasons. If you deal in a business that does a high volume on premise and people are paying in cash, there are multiple risks to that cash. Number one, some outside influence, knowing that the cash is there, right? Having to secure that. This particular client has been robbed blind by some of its most trusted employees in years prior. So he's biased away from wanting to keep cash on premises or accept cash. I understand all of that. But in terms of the greater good, I think that I, in a principled way, come down on the other side. That we should require businesses to accept fiat currency, that which is legal tender for all debts, public and private, our U.S. dollars, in exchange for goods and services, if for no other reason but to forestall this digitization of currency.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at, if you're running a small business and you're going to receive a wire of a significant sum of money, it's going to be delayed typically while it's vetted by banks and so forth. And so you're waiting patiently for that check that you need to clear. If you, in a digitized world, if you decide to, if a business, let's say a grocery store, decides to take only a digital form of payment, and you run afoul of some curator of digital data, and they decide, no, not this week, or what's more, they have the national broccoli mandate, and so you've ordered you've got one too many package of Fig Newtons and no vegetables. Does the algorithm say go back and try again? I simply don't want to be managed. Cash represents freedom. It represents an exchange of value. It's been a store of value forever, and it is anonymous. People can use it for their own purposes and without being monitored below a certain level. Federal law right now requires that any cash transaction of 10,000 or more requires the submission of a federal form. I mean, I resent that. I have to counsel clients. I took a new murder case just yesterday, and I might have hypothetically been asked, "How do you take payment?" I said, I take payment. I'm a lawyer, but I said, if you pay in cash and you bring more than $10,000, I'm going to have to take somebody's card, driver's license, and report it to the feds. And, people are put off by that, especially people who are in trouble with the law, because they're not looking for another set of eyes on them. And yet, so in my view, a requirement that you use a digital means of payment gives the person receiving payment enormous power, and it gives third parties monitoring the market enormous power. I don't like it.
I agree. Well, and that's why I think that the development on the North Carolina front is positive. Again, I keep coming back to North Carolina legislative efforts here, post Tricia Cotham changing parties.
Mike, tell me more about the law. Now, what is there going to be a federalism issue here? Suppose that there is an interstate entity, a large entity doing business in North Carolina, and North Carolina passes that act. Are they going to be able to claim that somehow their interstate commerce has been affected, and that because there's no federal requirement to use cash, this violates the principles of federalism? How's this going to play out?
I don't know, but there is a host of exceptions to the requirement to accept cash, and so I think 13 enumerated in this particular bill. It says, let's see, subsection A of this section does not apply to any of the following circumstances. It says a person is unable to accept cash either because of a system failure, that's obvious, or a person provides to customers a device at the physical location that converts cash into a prepaid card, so long as all the following requirements are met. And then it goes all the way down. So there is provision for ensuring that this is what it intends it to be, that if you're an individual going into a physical location like a convenience store or something else, right? Because I could also see there being a federalism issue in the reverse, which is you have these large corporations which do business in all 50 states. Think about Shell gas stations or these other things. If they were to all of a sudden roll out a policy across however many thousands of locations that they have across the country in the midst of a push from this administration, this presidential administration that is hell bent on doing EV energy and right? That they are going to try and appease this administration by lowering their carbon footprint, or, like trying to appease the sort of like social credit scoring thing. And they just say, hey, we're not going to accept cash anymore for fuel, blah, 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 you have to use a card. This becomes a real issue of, I think, in the reverse norm in terms of a federalism argument.
And then, to the degree that people are driven out of the digital market to retain freedom in exchange for autonomy, or in exchange for the use of a digital currency, will people resort to barter? And is this one of the reasons why we need 80,000 new IRS agents armed so that they can audit your bartering to when you've exchanged value off the marketplace? I don't know. Dystopia, dystopia, dystopia. I don't want to be a black pill guy. I'm looking for a white pill. I'm looking for a presidential candidate who's got something to say about the issues that matter to me. I'm looking for more Tucker Carlson. I mean, I know we're over time and we don't have to we don't start court till late in the afternoon, so I don't mean to hold you hostage, Mike, much less our listeners. But I have had some nominal communication with Tucker in the form of text messages in the last few days, and so I sent him a note saying more. Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? And I gather that he's working on that. That there may or may not be contractual issues that he has to honor yet. My hope is that he has the courage of his convictions, and that he can walk away from a payday and simply say, I am one of the people and I want to speak, because I think people will resonate with somebody who is untethered to mainstream media or the cable monoliths or megaliths, and speaks to the heart and basically says, we want debates, we want discussion. We're a country, a community, a society in crisis. Crisis is a Greek term that means turning point. Where do we turn for a better future? We're all hungry for the same thing. And that's why we bring you Law and Legitimacy.
That is indeed. The chat is alive. When you started talking about the cash payment of $10,000 or more, Lawyer Will seems to be, no surprise, very informed on the law as it relates to structuring, right? So if people try to avoid, they'll do multiple payments that fall short of that. So chat's alive with that. We may want to pick up a little more on that, because I do think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's not surprising to me that Lawyer Will would be involved in discussion of structuring and other things at the perimeter, at the boundary between the law and the lawful, the lawful and the lawless, I should say. But that I'm just teasing Lawyer Will.
Well, Norm, I have a tremendous amount of work to get done. So I'm going to throw in the white flag this morning, even though we're a little over time, but I love going a little longer. If any of you, has your poll ended on Twitter already?
I don't know. I did a poll and it was running about 80% of people want to return to 8 o'clock, but I thought we'd submit it to viewers. Let's do 7:45 next week and make a decision at the end of next week. How does that sound?
Sounds good. And for all of you that are hearing this question, if 8 is preferable for you, please send notes. Follow us on at Pattis Podcast on Twitter. You can follow Norm at Pattis Norm. You can communicate with us via locals. You can throw a comment in there, throw a comment in the chat here, or over on YouTube. Either way, let us know. It says Pete Atkinson, who showed up 20 minutes late today, is saying 8 a.m. is better for him.
Well, of course it is. I mean, because he's red wine. He's out there.
Look, he said that he'll do the wine selection for you next time as well. I just require that I be there for the second meeting.
Let's arrange it.
Anyway, I'm going to get out of here, Norm. Thank you as always. We'll be following you on Twitter to see if there are any sort of jury developments. So let us know. And if we want to do an impromptu one over the weekend, maybe we can squeeze that in.
That works. Be well, everyone.
All right. See you later, everybody.